from a competitive makeup standpoint, from a behavior standpoint, if I said to you competitive makeup, what does that mean to you through your lens?
Well, competitive makeup there's a few core components to me, generally speaking, when we see success that transcend, fields and industries. We tend to see highly successful people are we call it, for lack of a better word, they pursue competitive challenges, right? Or they're
Mm-hmm.
very achievement seeking people in that they're highly ambitious and they're highly oriented towards one-on-one competition. Right. And that's just not a sports thing. They just generally like the idea of extrinsically winning. Right. And they're largely drawn to a high degree of devotion to be successful. Right. Their self concept is very suited and they're willing to make a great deal of sacrifices to achieve that ambition, much of which is consistent with their self concept. Whereas you may see, the adverse or inverse to that may be someone who has fear of success or unwilling to make the sacrifices associated to be successful. And that can manifest in hundreds of different ways based on who you're talking to and why. But generally, we tend to see the competitive mindset is driven by a very strong ambition to be great, not just good, not just get there, but to be the greatest who's done it. It seems to be a table stakes motivational orientation.
Let me stop you right there. Because I have a. How do you measure that? That's my biggest issue. We go out. I've worked in scouting my whole life. We know that this stuff is really, really important. We ask young scouts to do this. This is in their job description. Mm-hmm. Get to know Jay Harrison. Get to know DJ. Get to know Shooter, and then come back and tell me if he has those things. Yeah. So they speak in these very broad terms, and they'll say, "Oh, he's very competitive." And then you'll ask for some example and they'll give you something very abstract and you'll go, okay, great. He's competitive. And we generally know that if a player makes it to the Division I level, Shooter played at Tulane, I played at Illinois. If a player makes it to minor league hockey, he already has a base level of work ethic and competitiveness. But how then do we extract the unique players? Because they're all generally competitive once they make it to that level. They wouldn't have made it there if they didn't know how to work at all, or they didn't compete a little bit, or they weren't resilient and all these kind of things. But how then, once we have this group of good, pretty relative to the rest of us, good competitive players, good competitive makeup, how do we extract the outliers? Because it's hard for me to understand how a scout's going to do that.
Yeah, it becomes one of the challenges, right? That, I think we've talked it before. And one of the challenges that exists generally in the talent assessment business is signals and static, right? And hearing a signal in static usually is what happens, not the confirmation bias. And that exists at all levels of evaluation, even psychology. Projective analysis can be incredibly difficult and it's incredibly poor reliability. For me, it's understanding, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily matter what exactly it is, but that we can measure what we say we're measuring consistently, and it reflects the behavior that we've all agreed is important to get the outcomes we're going for. So competitive outcome may look very, very different in your organization than mine, which may look very, very different at Google. But it does matter how we're measuring it, how consistent we're relatively measuring it to each other, and then how well we can demonstrate its predictive value to actually distinguishing the highest performers from the rest, right? So we also actually need to put it into play, right?